My name is Jessica Briones. I'm a Senior Manager Connected and Autonomous Vehicles at Mars Discovery District. My program offers pro bono services to artificial intelligence and machine learning startups that are working in the auto tech space. If you want to learn more about how to access those pro bono services, you can visit marscity.com/avan. Today, we have a fantastic guest, fantastic speaker. Selika Talbott is with us. I tried to summarize her very impressive bio. I know that I'm not going to be able to cover everything that she has done, but I'm going to give it a try here. So, Selika, thank you for joining us. Just for a little bit of background, Selika Talbott has written and spoken about public policy and provided strategic assistance for transportation association and automotive companies, including OEMs and Tier 1s and Tier 2s. She's a lecturer at the American University, a Forbes contributor, an advisory council for Partners for Automotive Vehicle Education, PAVE. She also served as a principal advisor to the United States Department of Transportation. On top of that, she has over 18 years of experience as an attorney litigator. For today's session, this is an informal fireside chat style. We're going to discuss critical considerations when designing the future of mobility, keeping public engagement, policy, and equity in mind. Just quickly, some housekeeping rules. You can leave your questions in the chat window. I'll try to read them first come, first serve basis. And without further ado, let's make Selika welcome with a round of virtual applause.
Thank you. Thank you. Happy to be here.
Fantastic. I guess maybe let us get to know you a little bit more. Sure. We will be very interested in knowing what motivated you to work in the auto tech sector.
When I first came out of law school, I worked for a product liability defense firm in Manhattan, and they spent a lot of their time representing OEMs. There were lots of big cases back then, product cases and class actions even. And I think we did a good job in concerns of the public and making sure that the manufacturers had good representation.
For the ladies in the house here, Selika is on LinkedIn. You can see her impressive career and how she has diverged from different topics, anything from connected to autonomous vehicles. So why we don't dive a little bit deeper into your area of expertise. So at the moment, we will talk about present issues and future issues, being future of mobility, the key topic. So at the moment, there are some concerns about economic and racial inequities in transportation today. Do you feel that these inequities have been exacerbated as a result of COVID-19? And speaking about the future, how do you think that connected and autonomous vehicles could address some of these issues?
Well, let's start by acknowledging where we are today. We certainly do see that inequities were baked into the system. Here in the United States, we have roadways that...
Sorry, yes. we're missing you. I think your camera just went off. Maybe if you can try just to turn it on and off again.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'll turn it off. And can you see me now?
No, we're struggling a little bit here. Can everyone? Yeah, okay. All right. So I'm just seeing here from the audience, they can see you, so that's fine.
Okay, all right. I just want to start at the beginning a little bit. If we acknowledge where we are with transportation, we have made decisions in building our roadways or building our metro systems where we cut off communities or cut through communities, having no concern for the people that live there and how that would impact their ability to access transportation. So that's the current state of where we are. As we see with COVID-19, there's certainly the people who are reliant on public transportation are now reliant on a system that opens them up to the possibility of infection and contamination with COVID-19. And so those of us who are able to take our own private transportation, we avoid having to be in those situations. And people who are reliant on public transportation find themselves exposed. We've had certainly lots of instances of bus drivers throughout the world who have caught and in some cases died from the coronavirus. So the inequities exist. We can start to look at what do we do from here and how can we make things better? Connected and autonomous vehicles certainly has the opportunity to provide what I call that level playing field, or at least to address some inequities that we currently have in society. But that is incumbent upon who's planning. If you're in a connected vehicle, it is the possibility that you'll be in closer range, using less emissions, and or the possibility that you are now creating less congestion on the roadway, which is better for the environment. If there's autonomous vehicles don't limit what community they go to because it's an autonomous vehicle. It's just meant to go pick up and drop off. So the vehicle is not determining that they don't want to pick you up based on how you look or drop you off based on the community that you want to be dropped off in. And that's significant for a good swath of the community. I think that when we look at inequities that are currently, though, in society, they're across all industries. So it's not a bad engineer or a bad planner. It's we have these systems that are in place. As we get to our new world, how are we going to make sure that we address them and at least be aware of so that we're planning to avoid them going forward in the future?
Thank you, Selika. This is a great start. So I'm just gonna read a quote from one of your publications, just like still talking about the topic. So one of the articles that you published for Forbes, so you mentioned, recent studies express concern that the autonomous vehicles will further widen the divide between the have and the have-nots. And then something important that you mentioned here is that you mentioned that will be an intentional decision. So can you tell us more about it and who should be accountable?
So when people sort of from the outside are talking about autonomous vehicles, they say, well, then all the rich people are going to have autonomous vehicles, and what happens to everyone else? Well, if you're really involved in the industry, you know that as we stand today, it looks like ride-hailing services are starting first, and that's what's happening with Waymo, and Piers Motional is going to be soon after that. And freight. Freight is operating in autonomous manners, certainly throughout the South and Southwest in the United States. So it's not a personal convenience yet, but it is more cost-effective when we look at moving from a model of independent vehicle ownership and looking at shared vehicle ownership. And if we do that, then we don't have to fear the have and the have-nots, because we all will have the same access to the same systems for the same purpose, which is mobility. I think that people are wise to be concerned, but if you start to break apart autonomous vehicles, what it can do for society, how it's offered, who it's offered to, you're probably less worried as long as it's part of what I call a transportation network.
And I guess that maybe one of the words of also considering transportation that is publicly available, like for those manufacturers out there, one can imagine that the economic rewards could also be bigger, right? Thinking bigger and trying to include more people, that could potentially be a benefit.
Absolutely. I mean, you know, safety is always paramount. We lose almost 40,000 people a year on US roadways to crashes. And so we never lose sight of safety. That's the first thing out the gate when we talk about autonomous vehicles. But then when we get deeper into the benefits for society, think about those who are differently abled, who normally would have to call 24 and 48 hours, sometimes a week ahead of time to schedule transportation for themselves. Autonomy provides that on-the-demand response, which gives them greater mobility in society. And that can only be a win for all of us.
Completely agree on that. Okay, so let's move on from the actual application to the public consent on this. So I'm just once again going to quote another one of your articles. So this article is titled, "Where Are We with Public Sentiment on Autonomous Vehicles?" In this particular article, you raise the flag for everybody who has been working diligently to perfect these technologies. You know, we're all trying to make the vehicles safer, more affordable. All this work, decades of work, you're trying to raise a flag here. So maybe help us understand what is that relation and what should it matter to the engineers and scientists joining today's conversation?
Well, public engagement and public sentiment is key to the actual rollout of autonomous vehicles. I use this example over and over again, and my children are grown now, so they're not thrilled when I use it, but it's what I call my Disney example. If I tell my kids to clean their room, and you just have to clean your room, it's in bad state and I want it cleaned up, they would go in and they would begrudgingly clean their room, and they would take their time, and it may take all afternoon, and it would probably not be a lackluster job. But if I said to them, hey, guess what, kids? When your room is cleaned and cleaned properly, we're gonna get in the car and drive to the airport. And then we're gonna take a plane and we're gonna go to Orlando, Florida. And we're gonna stay at Disney World for the week. And you can go to any ride you wanna go to and have any experience you wanna go to for a week in Disney. And all you have to do is clean up your room properly. It would be the cleanest room ever, right? Because I've explained the benefit at the
lucky kids
for them. That's really what it is for autonomous vehicles, right? We have this great thing. Those of us who are operating in the industry can say, oh my gosh, this is fantastic. And I will tell you, I've personally been in an autonomous truck, an autonomous law enforcement vehicle, an autonomous shuttle, an autonomous ride hail. I've had some wonderful experiences being in these vehicles. And one of the things that I note is for the general public, the person next door to me, when they see something mapping in Washington, D.C. on the streets, they have no idea what it is. They're concerned, or they don't even care because we haven't explained it to them. We haven't said the Disney World of Transportation is coming. We haven't said this is going to be the best experience ever. And boy, we're just around the corner from it. We're going about our business designing and sometimes understanding that we're problem solving, but we haven't told the people that we're solving the problem for. So they don't have input into it. And therefore, at the end of the day, we're going to wind up, if we don't get this correct now, with some of the same inequities and flaws that we have built in the system today, because we didn't include the right people. If the engineers and planners who are planning for autonomous vehicles only communicate with the people who live in urban environments, then they're not going to get it right for the people who live in rural communities. And if they only talk to people in the suburbs, then they'll miss some of the major issues that autonomous vehicles can solve for people in urban areas. This requires a lot of homework and a lot of public engagement. And it's not as simple to say, we had an open meeting, we invited people to the mic to tell us what their concerns were, what they're interested in, or how they care about it, if we don't break apart the nitty-gritty and try to understand people's lives holistically. So we're always talking about transportation, but transportation, frankly, is more than that. Transportation is mobility, and mobility is freedom.
Mm-hmm.
So when we're talking about transportation, we're talking about healthcare, and we're talking about food, and we're talking about jobs, and we're talking about the ability to sustain yourself and have a quality life. Sorry, I get excited about this topic.
I love that. It's fantastic. I like that quote, mobility is freedom. It's so true. And it does have the potential to bring that, right? So you have been on you've been working very closely with policymakers. I think, while we were preparing for this conversation, you and I were talking about how to convene all these stakeholders. What does the policymaker need to do? What does the technologies need to do? And then I ask you for some examples of organizations that are doing things right. You represent one of them through PAVE. So maybe, would you mind giving us some examples of how, organizations can start working together and can start informing each other? And yeah, we're facing a chicken and egg situation here. So who should start first?
Right. So this is one of those instances where everybody has an obligation. Everybody has a duty. I will sing the praises of PAVE because I'm on it, because they get it. Education is key. And so that education doesn't mean that I'm only talking to the public, also for regulators. It means that I'm having conversations with the government people who are going to be responsible for implementation. I have had conversations across the country with OEMs, with startups, with government regulators and legislators. And what I find is everybody has a rough understanding of each other's space, but not a clear enough insight. And so I think I'll say this, the secret is people in government often think that the startups are exaggerating. They are claiming that they will have technology ready to go and it won't be ready to go in their lifetimes, not in widespread use. That concerns me because we can't have widespread use if we don't have government bumper cars around autonomous vehicles on the road. And if the government people haven't agreed that this is in the near term, then they won't be prepared when there's final sign off from companies that says, we got this, our vehicles are ready to go. And for government people, on regulator side, we haven't had enough. I know that we want the autonomy to be able to develop without government interference, and government can very often bog down progress. But especially in the United States, where we have different states with different laws, if we don't have a federal regulatory framework, we won't be able to get from one state to the next. You'll be landlocked within the state that you're operating in. I think one of the blessings we see today is NHTSA came out with a proposed rulemaking that they're moving forward with addressing some of these issues on autonomous vehicles. And I welcome the work that they're doing because I know they have been at it for a long time. But also as the general public, you have an obligation not to just sit on your hands and hope someone's going to spoon feed you this information. For planners, you need to engage with the communities that you are solving a problem for. And that's what engineers and city planners are, problem solvers. So make sure you understand what the problem is before you go about solving it, so you don't create unintended negative consequences.
Absolutely. Yeah, not everything that has wheels needs to be autonomous, right? Or thank you for that. So we have a question from the audience. The question here is, considering that current rideshare services are not available widely in rural areas, will this also be a challenge in the future for autonomous vehicles? I think you touched a little bit about it at the beginning, but if you wouldn't mind just expanding for the audience.
Absolutely. So I don't know if challenge seems negative or challenge seems positive. Is it an issue that needs to be addressed? Absolutely. But I think that we can find ways to service the entirety of our populace. We're never going to be successful as a society if we only take care of a few and ignore the many. So the use cases across the United States specifically, but we can find this all over the world, is we have a lot of people centered in big cities and then scattered throughout suburban and or rural communities, but they have the same needs. And government is subsidizing those communities when people are on the fringes. So one of the things that I see as a potential for future use is if you receive some kind of government assistance, Medicaid, Medicare, the best thing for you, if you had any physical ailment, diabetes, for instance, would be to have regular checkups with your healthcare professional. But you might live in an in a rural community that doesn't have ready access to transportation. And that one truck or van is servicing a farm and can't take the day off to drive 50 or 75 miles to the nearest doctor. If instead of waiting for that individual who needs regular healthcare maintenance to only be treated in acute and urgent manners, so when the ambulance is coming to get you, but as a society, we said, we're going to pay for it or include a transportation payment in your Medicaid or Medicare, then we're underwriting your healthcare because we're no longer treating you acutely and urgently when it is more costly, but we are helping you to have maintenance, which sustains life and puts you in a better position. That same model can be played out whether it's healthcare or access to jobs, or if you live in a food desert. We're either bringing the food to you or bringing you to the food. But we have options here where it's not a hand wringing. It's this is why I say this is a transportation network. This is pulling the entire system as we know it apart today. And what is the ideal way for us to exist as a society 15, 20 years from now? And then let's build it in that direction. It means we're not just disassembling transportation as we know it. We're addressing the inequities in healthcare. We're addressing the fact that people don't have access to good food all the time, and they're not good resources for food in everyone's community. And instead of this notion that we're going to take jobs away from people, start to say, as a society, should we be bending ourselves over backwards to support someone's delivery job when your delivery job can't provide a sustainable living for you and your family? Or can we give up that delivery job over to a delivery robot or to an autonomous vehicle, and then provide that person with the skills that they need so that they can have a living wage to sustain themselves and their family? If we look at this holistically, then we can make better, long-lasting improvements that in the end, frankly, will not cost us more. Will just provide us with a better community and society.
For sure. Yeah, no, that's a fantastic point. And it is a reminder that everything is interconnected, right? And we are seeing it now more than ever with COVID, and interdependencies are greater now. One of the challenges I think it's when you're working with multiple governments. So for example, in the case of a rural area, you're talking about transportation, Department of Transportation, departments of economic development. You are involving also telecommunications. So it's it is complex, but I guess the idea here is having a holistic approach in that regard. So there is a question here about the current policy. So and future of transportation. So it says, do you think current policy around the future of transportation and transportation mode and networks, so we're talking about telecommunication, does enough to increase mobility that can uplift North American society? And what does the end state look like for every citizen? That's
so that's a pretty that's a good question. Are we solving problems? Yes. Have we problems? Of course not. Could we do better? Absolutely. Some of the things that make me really positive about where we're going, Governor Newsom in California has his executive order that says they're going to remove, well, they're no longer going to have cars after 2035 that are internal combustion engines being sold. You're not going to be able to buy a new one in the state of California after 2035. We see it in the UK. Boris Johnson says after 2030 for them, no more ICEs. But what's even more refreshing and exciting is the announcement today from General Motors that says they're going to make their whole line electric vehicles. We as a society, across corporations, whether in transit specifically or tangentially, understand that there is a problem and we're problem solving. For GM, when they looked at this, they looked at sustainability, they looked at environment and impacts on the climate and said, we can make a difference, but they're going to make money at making a difference. And so it doesn't have to be either or. Some people are fearful that we're all do-gooders and we're going to create a socialist society and no one's going to have any money and we're going to be on bread lines all the time. But that's not factual. The wonderful thing about the human spirit and human ingenuity is we're always tasking to make things better. It's like that we have our own internal drive that says, how can we improve something? How can we solve this problem? How can we make things better? And for me, I'm energized by transportation company after transportation company, or government authorities or government regulators saying, we can do better. We recognize the inequities that we've had in our societies where we've banned public transportation for some communities, where we didn't allow certain people to be in certain communities. We've pushed that all away. And now we're looking at the new tomorrow, which is transportation that lets you get a good job, that lets you have access to best healthcare or better healthcare, and that brings you to good food or brings good food to you. It's incredibly exciting and engaging right now.
Absolutely. And it is not charity. The economic potential is there. We know some of the huge opportunities that working on multimodal transportation, for example, can bring. I have one last thought here is actually by David, one of the organizers of the session, key organizer. Speaking on multimodal transportation, so here in Toronto, we just started a new autonomous vehicle shuttle, and the shuttle is combining, like this approach of multimodal transportation. So the autonomous shuttle goes to subway station and back. Do you have any thoughts on maybe experiences as working as a public servant or through one of the NGOs you volunteer for on like positive implementations of multimodal transportation, and how well have they worked?
So I have not been involved myself with setting up the operation of an autonomous shuttle, but I did do a two-day forum at American University. And on Tuesday, I had an opportunity to speak to people from Fairfax County, Virginia, and they have a autonomous shuttle. And I think what they shared with the audience at large was the ability to reach lots of people, to reach people who had who were differently abled. And so you were giving access and transportation to people who didn't normally have it or have it in that on-demand fashion as the shuttle was providing. I think one of the things they also realized is that there had to be a significant amount of public engagement, because when the public felt comfortable, it would be better for them. And they engaged early, well before the vehicles were on the roadway. And once the vehicles were on the roadway, they continued that engagement. They didn't say, okay, we've told you all about it, and now it's here, have a great day. They said, okay, starting operation, tell us what you think about the operation. How is it working for you? How can we make it better? Who else can we service? Often as planners, again, we're looking at it from our perspective, And generally, we're not the ones who are utilizing the service on a day-to-day basis. So we need to make sure we are interacting with the end user, the consumer, and knowing that we're addressing their needs, and also that their needs could change. The needs that people had in January of 2020 are certainly not the needs that we have in November of 2020 based on a pandemic. But other things have happened in society throughout time, and they all affect our transportation needs and our transportation networks. So what I would say is, the question you need to ask is, are you still asking questions?
And this critical thinking approach, I think it will take us a long way. It's 3:36 p.m. Unfortunately, time to let you go. But thank you so much, Selika, for challenging our thinking and for helping us to picture a better society with a more holistic approach. Once again, thank you to the organizers of the event. And yeah, I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference. Selika, good luck in your own conference that you're hosting today.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you having
Wonderful.
me.
Thank you. Thank you to our audience. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.